G'day legends, I hope that you're all doing well and a good end to this week. Now, we're going to talk today about some new information I got about the attack in Moscow at the Kremlin, how Ukraine shot down one of its own drones, and Zelensky speaking at The Hague. Also a video of Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin in front of a mountain of bodies of his own men calling out other Russian leaders about ammunition shortages, and we'll talk about some more instances of this as well. But a lot of this will have to be censored, and the uncensored is on my Patreon, but it's also very easy to find on Twitter too. And then we'll talk about some news, but first let's have a look at the maps as always. So here in the center, we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas here are areas occupied since 22, the purple since 14. It's been Crimea and Donetsk. And the green areas liberated by Ukraine since the beginning of this invasion. We have Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, where are we going to go into? We're going to go straight down, as always, into Bakhmut and see if we can see any changes. So the map has actually updated twice today, the last one being about 3 or 4 hours ago for me here in Australia. So if we go back to the early one of the 5th and then back to the 3rd was when we got our last update, we don't see any major shifts around Bakhmut. All that we do see is that this grey zone gets a little bit smaller in the north, the grey zone being the area of fighting. Now, how does that compare to then the ISW map? So we see here. So what we'll look at is the claimed control in the yellow and assessed in the red. Now, the claimed control we see coming along and up to this road where it loops around and through, which is right here, this road here. So it is painting a fairly similar picture, at least, although the grey zone here is a lot bigger. So let's compare the ISW map to yesterday's one. Let me just find this here. And this would have been yesterday's map here. And have we seen any significant changes? Not really at all. So it's all looking very much the same and the same picture throughout. What about between the War Mapper map as well? And sadly, I don't have a Russian sources map today, but War Mapper is showing that we take as well this reservoir and where this road loops around just as icons so you can, put the two maps together more easily. And we see a fairly similar picture, although more area taken in some areas on the War Mapper and less on some areas on the ISW. So we see more areas on the ISW down around where this road splits. The MiG-17 statue is around here, but more areas up into some pieces around here where this road loops around, and at least more claim control down into here. And let's compare that up to the deep state and what is it showing. So this is where the road loops around. So it's sort of skimming just down here where the deep state will say that there are Russian forces all the way up onto these areas. So again, it is very similar, not too much of a difference. Now, where have we seen any movement? Not really anywhere. So we come down into Avdiivka, and all we saw was a tiny map correction to the north, but nothing really. It's saying maybe Russia took some ground there, but nothing of significance. And then let's compare War Mapper's update today to Avdiivka. So what is showing different? Now we'll take this main road down here to this major intersection that pulls off. So this is the major intersection here that comes up. That is showing a fairly similar picture, although maybe some more ground taken on the War Mapper up into these large Ukrainian defensive positions in here, but as well as showing that there is claim control over Kamianka, but there is not on the War Mapper map. And this is similar as well then to the Deep State. The Deep State is showing no changes in Mariinka either over the last couple of days, and that's been really all the way back until I believe the 2nd or the 3rd or the 1st, where we saw a step up here, which matched then to the Rybar map. And let's look at Mariinka today compared to yesterday when we have a screen grab here. And what is showing different? Nothing really is different here. The only difference here is saying down near Pavlohrad, there is some Ukrainian territory has been taken back from the Russian forces over only the last 24 hours. The only interesting move that we have seen over the last couple of days, I believe, is down near Kherson. We have these number of islands in this sort of marshy region that's the end of the Dnieper River that flows basically north to south Ukraine and forms a bit of a wedge through the country. So down all the way through here. So what we have seen is some changes around here. Now, the Deep State doesn't show the territory that is claimed to be taken by Ukrainian control. So Ukraine did cross near Kherson here and managed to set up some positions in here, but we don't know the full extent of that. And as well, that some of these areas are now saying they're controlled by Ukraine. Now, what we have seen over the past really 72 hours is both Russia take control of some of these smaller islands and Ukraine also take control of some of these as well. So if we come back and then from the 1st to the 2nd to the 3rd, that's where we see a change there, but not too much change around this area as we know Ukraine has been crossing there. So in this this region here, I have this video just to show you how narrow this is at some points of a Russian video that they say is bombing an ammunition warehouse from the Ukrainian forces. So this is the Russian controlled side, this is the Ukrainian controlled side. So you see the first impact here, and the dust cloud rising up from this impact, blowing in the wind. And then we'll see a second strike here. This is claimed from the Russian Air Force of guided munitions. And then we see the second impact here. And then not very far after this second impact, we start seeing thick black smoke starting to rise up, although the video does cut, and I'm not sure what time frame we're actually looking at between these two shots. Some people like something I said yesterday right at the end of my video, and let's not pretend like anyone watches me for half an hour every day. What it was trying to dehumanize the enemy is a coping mechanism for those going through the trauma of battle and war. That it is dangerous and a sad way to live your life if you're living in relative safety and posting about this on Twitter. It will prevent you from seeing situations clearly and can spiral you into a lack of empathy in many aspects of your life. The only people who think it's cool to be that jaded, hard veteran are people who haven't seen that firsthand and the ramifications from that. I implore people to remain human and try and have some empathy in all aspects of your life, not just to situations like this. And this animation here is one of my favorite animations ever made, called The Paths of Hate. Now, I can't play this full video, but we have these two World War II pilots here, caught in a dogfight, fighting each other. And through this, we see that they are men just fighting and fighting over the skies. And we see the continuation of this dogfight and these men. And throughout this, you'll see the men's faces starting to change. Here we see the wife of one of these men pinned to the dashboard of the aircraft. You see the rounds feeding through the guns. You see the men red in their eyes. We see the absolute fierceness of in the battle after we see the picture of his wife's face. And then the beads break off his hand. And that picture of his wife, again with blood then splattered onto it. You'll see this moment of like coming to, and the planes flying together at this point, almost not in a combat scenario as they've ran both out of ammunition. And from here we see these beads on the floors, the dripping of blood as these planes are out of ammunition flying along together. And you see the photograph come off the dashboard of the aircraft onto his face, and then just come out the window. One of the most important things to him, obviously, then not meaning anything, as these men turn from men to, and there's this moment of peace, and then it comes that they are turning further and further, breaking apart, losing who they are as men, and turning in. Eventually through this, they both crash, and then die trying to just find one another on the ground. And I think this is a story about men turning and losing themselves in war through this trauma. And people might think that things like this are cool. It's cool when you haven't experienced anything like this and seen people who you love who have really battled with situations like this. Now, this video has been released by Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin in front of tens of bodies of deceased Wagner soldiers. The video will, of course, be censored and I can't show it in here, but it's available on my Patreon and Twitter as well. In this video, he is out of character angry, directing the message personally at Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, and Gerasimov, the Chief of the General Staff Armed Forces. Now, take note of Shoigu because we'll talk about him a little bit later on. Now, in the video, he says these guys are from Wagner PMC who died today. Their blood is still fresh. Listen to me, you. These are someone's fathers and someone's sons. And these who are not giving us ammunition, we have a 70% ammo deficit. Shoigu, Gerasimov, where is the ammo? You scumbags are sitting in expensive clubs. Your children enjoy life. They came here as volunteers and are dying for you to get a free ride. And sadly, this can be the reality of soldiers in any war. It wasn't very clear to me as a young soldier, but it's become more and more evident the more I learn about war and study war. War is old men talking and young men dying. This is not the first time in this war that we have seen leaders use deceased people in a call for more weapons from other leaders. As I always say, I do believe Prigozhin is playing multiple sides of this chess game, and he also threatens the leadership of the Russian Federation, and they're having a need to limit his success while he's one of the only ones who's actually seemingly to have any battlefield success. I also believe that Prigozhin is doing this all very calculated with political ambition and of course business ambition, because Wagner Group is his business, as the Russian Federation will turn power either by force or age in the next couple of years. Now, I will say, no matter your thoughts on Prigozhin, he's one of the only leaders who, or at least publicly, has shown some empathy for troops fighting in this war. More PMCs are being formed, and Shoigu, who Prigozhin speaks of in this, is in direct competition. So let's have a look at this, and we'll also talk about PMCs just for a little bit. Skip over this if you want the rest of the news. So this is from actually a Ukrainian source. The only other PMC approaching Wagner's size and experience is Redoubt, and this is funded by 2 oligarchs who are financing the company. Now, Defense Minister Shoigu, who Yevgeny Prigozhin calls out, has a smaller PMC named Patriot. Now, I don't know about you, but it doesn't really fly in many countries where your defense minister can also have a PMC. Now, the Chechen leader, Razman Kadyrov, said he also wants to found a PMC once he steps down from public office. A grouping called Convoy was formed in recent months with the close involvement of Russian-installed political Sergei That. Convoy gets its financing also from Prigozhin. Russian state gas company Gazprom has been creating units. The most notably is actually called Potok, reportedly operating under the leadership of Redoubt, the one we talked about in the beginning. Now it says here that Gazprom's reportedly creating 2 other units, Feykal and Plymya, commanded by the Defense Ministry. And we've talked in length about Potok before and about PMCs actually before as well. But the one I want to talk about is Patriot, which is from the Defense Minister Shoigu. Now, this source is from Wikipedia, so take this with a fucking grain of salt. But it's just as reliable as people on Twitter as well. Patriot, which is in direct competition to Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner group and deployed by Russia in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Patriot operates close cooperation with the Russian Ministry of Defense and the GRU. The Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and the Russian MOD are believed to have strong influence over the company. Unlike Wagner Group, Patriot focuses on more experienced soldiers with combat experience when recruiting. Now, we do know that Wagner Group, there are really 2 sides. There is a side of just conscripted people and prisoners as well, used as the meat. There is the complete business, personal security side as well that operates not only in Ukraine, but in all around the world as well. And there is then the elite fighting force of Tier 1 operators as well. But the mercenaries are also better equipped and trained, and according to media reports, Patriot's members receive a monthly salary of $6,300 to $15,800, which is a huge salary anywhere in the world. Like, bloody hell, I'd take that money in a heartbeat. But if you put those numbers across onto the average earnings in Russia, that is huge. And this is where private military contracts are very lucrative business. Now, there are plenty of benefits of using these PMCs, and there's lots of these benefits that the Western world take advantage of too. All over the time, we've seen the infamous Blackwater contractors, which were renamed to XC Services in 2009, and then again renamed to Academy in 2011. Now, this was not shut down like people will say, and there are lots of benefits to PMC as far as efficiency, cost, experience, and it's a lot easier to hire a PMC for a few months than to raise a standing armour. Also, these PMCs give a buffer for state responsibility, and this is a very lucrative business with hundreds of PMCs around the world. And let's have a look at some of these. So this is also from Ukrainian source. If Russia's new strategy makes a big difference, talking PMCs, the entrance of new PMCs will hinder the efforts of Wagner and the Ministry of Defense and to replenish their forces, which we have seen in some of these videos. However, PMCs can drive their troops more relentlessly. Unlike regular forces, there are fewer rules keeping mercenary commanders from men who try to retreat or surrender. And we've seen this both in Western and Eastern PMCs before. It says it is also easier for PMCs to brutalize the Ukrainian population. If something scary happens and they commit a war crime, the Kremlin can say, those aren't ours. Yeah, we hired someone, we thought they would behave themselves, but sorry, only Prigozhin or whatever company is can bear responsibility. And we've seen this again and again with many cases of PMCs working all around the world. Now, this is directly from the Australian Army Land Warfare Centre Handbook, which if you've been in the military as a junior commander, you'll know all about these handbooks. So let's have a look at what they say about PMCs in the modern space. Private military contractors, PMC, from an increasingly prominent element of military operations. The PMC provides a range of services including catering, logistics, admin, training, tel, aviation, close personal protection, which that's close personal protection is what we see the other side of Wagner's business is too, key point security and convoy security. Some PMCs also possess the capability to undertake offensive combat operations, and these are the ones we're talking about here. But well, be known that when we talk about PMC, all these other things come into it as well. At the end of the day, someone needs to feed and do the admin for even Wagner Group. And in the form of Western militaries, we put out, say, our catering and even close personal protection to some of these PMC groups that work on the Western side. Like other coalition forces engaged in the global war on terrorism, the Australian Defence Force is increasingly reliant on PMC for during operations. Yet the employment of PMCs raises important questions relating to the status of national armed forces, the reputation and reliability of PMC, applicability of the laws of armed conflict, national laws and accountability, command control and interoperability. So talking here about the laws of armed conflict as well, raised in that other article. So continuing, PMC rates are far higher than those of national armed forces. In 2003, Tier 1 SF operators from the US, UK and Oz earned $2,000 a day, although this has gradually fallen to $700. Some PMC participating in military operations have experienced serious problems and very negative publicity. 4 operators from US PMC Blackwater, which we just spoke about who has been renamed, were murdered in Fallujah in 2004 and their bodies suspended from a bridge. In 2007, a group of Blackwater operatives opened fire in Nusra Square, Baghdad, killing 17 Iraqi civilians. And by the end of 2007, Blackwater had 2,300 personnel deployed in 9 countries, including the US, where Blackwater and armed guards formed part of the response to Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. So I just need to point out that these businesses are large. These aren't just a group of ragtag guys. These are huge businesses. And a lot of people say that, say Wagner Group, XE, Academy, that these are a lot larger companies than people think. They have thousands of employees. Employment at PMC poses 9 main challenges. The PMC erode national states' traditional monopoly over the use of violence, which was established at the Treaty of Westphalia. Private corporations may choose to operate outside the bounds of international law and may be less accountable to such laws than sovereign governments. The PMC provide services to transnational corporations and that act in the interest of their shareholders rather than the interest of a particular nation. So these groups can operate not in the interest of the nation, but they don't operate under a flag. They can operate in the interests of their shareholders. Say Yevgeny Prigozhin, he could turn his forces on the Russian Federation if he wanted to. Now, they may also develop linkages to important elements of national economies, such as mining interest, and exert undue influence over the host government. Now, this one's of national economies, such as mining interests. I know a lot of guys personally who work in PMCs who are security for mines all around the world. Third, PMC may be employed by sovereign governments in preference to national forces in order to avoid the requirement for governmental scrutiny. Now, this is absolutely like we spoke about before with Wagner Group. The opportunities provided by employment of PMC may lead to an accelerated loss of specialists from the national armed forces. And this is something I've seen a lot of my friends have left the armed forces and gone to the PMC. The pay is a lot better. A trend already visible by the special forces personnel are targeted by PMC. Peter Singer claims that by 2008, there were more former soldiers from the British SAS working in Iraq than men currently serving in the regiment being the SAS, the Special Air Service. And fifth, the history shows PMC may be employed both to overthrow a legitimate government and to support an illegitimate government. So there are lots of benefits to PMCs and lots of negative also to PMCs. And sorry I went off on a little bit of tangent there, but I don't think people realise how prominent PMCs are all around the world and how we'll see these become more of a player in this conflict and many other conflicts. You know, even just myself, I have many tens of friends working in PMCs in Asia, all around the world, and guys who are working in Afghanistan right up until the fall. Remember, war is the most well-funded, most lucrative business in the world, which laws are able to be bent by powerful enough people, and this happens every day. Now let's look further on the attack on the Kremlin, where we saw 2 drones strike the roof. Now we spoke yesterday about how the range of a small quadcopter was definitely out of the picture from being deployed from Ukraine. So the most likely were partisans working inside Moscow or a false flag event. Now I had another gentleman reach out to me, pointing me to this Russian blogger called Inside Russia, who makes some great points of which I missed yesterday. So let's look over these. The attack theory is impossible to execute by an outsider without special knowledge or special help. He talks about the Kremlin. It's a radio wave dead zone. Mobile internet doesn't work that. Pointing out that he had difficulties with map location there numerous times. The dead space was created for, you guess it right, so the drones would not fly over the Kremlin. So how did 2 consumer drones would fly over the Kremlin then? Now, some are saying that it was a military special purpose drone sent from Ukraine. That sounds absurd. Military large strike drone, 2 of them could fly over 1,000 kilometers over Western Russia unnoticed by Russian air missile defense systems. And we do know that the S-400, S-300 systems are very good systems that operate both in Russia and in Ukraine. Now, who benefits? Definitely not Ukrainians. Now, for the Russian government, it's a completely different story. They can give excuses to the Russians for escalating bombing Ukraine, and they can cause more fear with regular people, can ban drone possession and operation in Russia, then confiscate existing drones from people and send them to the front lines. They can also announce the start of a domestic terror campaign, looking for domestic enemies. Too many benefits to mention here. Again, if you disagree, please share. So he talks about this dead zone, and this is something that I should have really thought of, because even in Afghanistan, I had on my vehicle ECM, electronic countermeasure, and you'll see the 2 booms on the front of this Bushmaster vehicle, and this Bushmaster vehicle is the same type that we sent to Ukraine as well. Now, these booms stop radio waves from mobile phones, from remote control cars, to set off improvised explosive devices, things like that, and they saved a lot of lives. These were actually invented by Australian forces and then used all around the world, saving hundreds of lives and you're driving over IEDs that did then not explode. But systems like this can be used everywhere, and this is saying that the Kremlin is a dead zone like that as well, which I absolutely will not be surprised. The area in the Kremlin is 100% surveilled. It's the safest area in Russia. Video surveillance and secret agents on the ground dressed as tourists and local everywhere. Everywhere. The authorities, is guarded by KGB, not local cops, would pinpoint and arrest drone operators within minutes after the first attack. And there were 2 attacks with a gap between them. And why at night? There's no one in the Kremlin at night, certainly not Putin. Perhaps it's easy to plan an extra inside job at night. And why assassination attempt? Russian propaganda called the attack Putin's assassination attempt. Why at night when he was not even anywhere near the Kremlin? Particularly this bit about mobile internet does not work and radio wave dead zone, I would say is completely true. And this is something that I really should have thought of, and I didn't, especially because you're relying on not only steering the drone, but also then having something explode from there. And the amount of systems you need to shut down to do this. And this isn't just pull up your laptop and shut down these systems. These electronic countermeasure systems are very, very complex and actually very difficult to get around because it works very simply. Now, I know it's more complex than this, but in a short way, what it is basically just drowning out everything else. It's nothing too complex. So the way I've had it explained to me was, imagine being in a super loud room and you trying to talk. That if the room goes quiet, you can talk to one another. But if it's that loud, then you can't hear one another. So yes, other radio waves are present, but they're being completely drowned out and unable to speak to each other from between this because of the amount of other radio waves that are jamming them, if that's an all right way to try and explain it. Now, Zelensky has spoken at The Hague for the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Now, many are asking how the ICC has any jurisdiction when neither Ukraine or Russia are signatories to the Rome Statute. So let's have a look at him and then we'll talk a little bit more about this. And this is the video here of Zelensky where he's speaking English.
We all want to see different Vladimir here.
Saying that he'll see Vladimir here at the ICC to be tried at The Hague.
In The Hague. The one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions right here in the capital of the international law. And I'm sure we will see that happen when we win.
So he says that we're sure we'll see it happen. Now, the only way for Putin to actually be arrested is if he enters one of the states that is actually a signatory to the ICC and Rome Statute. So that they then will have to arrest him and take him here. But if he never visits one of those countries, it is very unlikely that we'll actually ever see Putin here. And we'll talk about this further down.
And we will win.
He says that they will win.
And we win not just on the battlefield, not just against this aggression. Look at how countries around the world are coming together to help Ukrainians defend themselves. What is at the heart of this desire to help?
Speaking about how many countries all around the world, and many countries have come around the world to help Ukraine in its fight, particularly countries from the West.
The feeling that more than the fate of one country is at stake. The feeling that more can be achieved than the defeat of one aggressor.
So he said more than one country is at stake. And this is what people have talked about, that if Ukraine wants to fall and that the Western world did allow Russia to land grab Ukraine, what does Russia do next? Do they try and take a country to their south? Do they try and take Poland? Do they try and enter other countries? And what precedence is that setting?
We can now stop wars of aggression as such.
Says that we can stop wars of aggression. Now, I will say that we will never stop war. World War I was the war that was meant to end all wars, and not very far after we had World War II, then we have Korea, Vietnam, the war on terror, and now we've got the war between Ukraine and Russia.
We can defeat aggression as a criminal idea that originates in the mindset of someone who is used to impunity.
As long as people are in positions of power, war will always happen, especially when there's economic and political advancement for war.
Impunity is the key that opens the door to aggression.
But what Zelensky is saying here, that if he's given impunity and is not arrested, then wars like this will continue. And Zelensky appearing in his usual green sweater at The Hague. Again, I probably would have worn a suit. I don't know, I'll cop some hate over saying that, because you can't criticise anything east of Russia. Now, let's have a look over some of this. So we're going to talk in length about the ICC. Now, jurisdiction and the general situation. Now, this is from the ICC's website. Ukraine is not a state party to the Rome Statute. but it has twice exercised the prerogatives to accept the court's jurisdiction. And this is all taken from the ICC's website, as well as some other PDFs investigating this. Now, how did the ICC obtain jurisdiction to investigate Putin? Neither Russia nor Ukraine are members of the ICC, which could have granted automatic jurisdiction to investigate crimes committed by Russia. However, in 2015, following the invasion of Crimea, the Ukrainian government granted the ICC jurisdiction to investigate crimes against humanity and war crimes committed on Ukrainian territory by Russian forces. From here, the prosecutor has formed the largest investigative team ever deployed by the ICC, with some investigators based nearly permanently in Ukraine. So they're not permanent because it's nearly. So they're based there a lot. It is now well established in international law that there is no head of state immunity for war crimes, crimes against humanity, before international tribunals, and the Rome Statute establishing the ICC is clear on this point. We'll talk about the Rome Statute and what that is just in 1 second. So further from here, and this is from the Congressional Research Centre for the ICC's jurisdiction generally extends only to those countries that have become parties to the Rome Statute, establishing the ICC. Neither Ukraine or Russia are parties. In general, the ICC lacks jurisdiction over actions within territory of these countries. However, the ICC may exercise jurisdiction over non-parties for the crimes in the specified requirements of Article. First, the country must submit a declaration to the register of the ICC accepting the exercise of the ICC's jurisdiction. So in the last article we just talked about. Second, the case must be one that prosecutor self-initiated or initiated at the request of a party to the Rome Statute, with neither country are a party to the Rome Statute. In this case, Ukraine filed a declaration in 2014 accepting the ICC's jurisdiction for a period of 2013 to 2014, requested that the ICC investigate alleged crimes against humanity committed in its territory during this time. Ukraine has filed a second declaration in 2015 extending the acceptance of ICC jurisdiction February 25th, 2014 to an undetermined date. Now, what is the Rome Statute? The Rome Statute is an international treaty that is established by the ICC, a court that investigates and prosecutes individuals for the most serious crimes, such as war crimes and crimes against humanity. The Rome Statute was adopted in 1998 and it came to force in 2002, and it provides the legal framework for the ICC's jurisdiction, functions and procedures. Now, we'll look at countries that have actually signed on to the Rome Statute. In green, we have state parties, as you can see, and then we have yellow signatory that is not ratified. So you can actually see here, Ukraine is a signatory that is not ratified. You can see that China is a non-state party, and the US and Russia as signatory that have subsequently withdrawn their signatures. So both the US and Russia signed on and then have withdrawn their signatures from these. Now, what this is all relating to is earlier this year an arrest warrant was put out for and Maria Lvova-Belova. So we see here in 17th of March 23, Pre-Trial Chamber 2 of the International Federation Court issued warrants for the two individuals' context in the situation of Ukraine for and Maria Lvova-Belova. President of the Russian Federation is allegedly responsible for the war crime of unlawful deportation of children and that unlawful transfer of children from occupied areas of Ukraine to the Russian Federation under these articles of the Rome Statute. Now, Ms. Lvova-Belova, the Commissioner for the Children's Rights in the Office of the President of the Russian Federation, is allegedly responsible for the war crime of unlawful deportation of the population of children and that of unlawful transfer of population from occupied areas in Ukraine from the Russian Federation under these articles of the Rome Statute. Now, the ICC can't just go and arrest Putin or Maria because they don't have a police force, but it has limited his ability to travel to countries who are signatories to the Rome Statute, as they are meant to arrest him when he lands there, although some states have said that they will not arrest Putin, such as Hungary. So we see here that Hungary is a signatory to the Rome Statute and the treaty created by the ICC. From the Hungarian government, we can refer that the Hungarian law, and based on that, we cannot arrest the Russian president, as the ICC statute was not promulgated in Hungary, saying that of the 125 member states of the ICC are obliged to act to the arrest warrant. Vilnius claimed on Thursday the Rome Statute had not been built into the Hungarian legal system, so it would not apply, saying these decisions are not the most fortunate as they take things towards further escalation and not towards peace. This is my personal subjective opinion. Russia has dismissed the ICC warrant as unacceptable, saying that it is not subject to the ICC's decision, which Russia isn't. Same as the US, they have not signed on. Russia, like a number of states, does not recognise the jurisdiction of this court, and accordingly, any decisions of this kind are null and void for the Russian Federation from the point of view of law, from the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, which is very true. If Russia does not go to one of the countries that are signed on, or including Hungary, then he cannot be arrested. Now, I think on this as well, there are more than reasonable grounds to also arrest many Western leaders, primarily President Bush and Blair, on crimes against humanity of an illegal invasion of Iraq that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, and some will say up to 1 million Iraqi civilians. And I think that they should be held to the same standard that we're holding someone like of when we're talking about war crimes. Now, over Ukraine today, Kyiv has used an air defense missile to shoot down one of its own drones. So here we see this footage here. So this is from Maidan Square. We'll show the geolocation in a second. But this, if you've ever been to Ukraine, this is dead center of Ukraine, and this is a very recognizable place. So here we see this drone flying along here, which is a Turkish-built Bayraktar drone, and you can see the traces being fired as well as the gunshots in the background. And then we'll see this flying along, and then we'll see an air defense missile take this out of the sky. Bang. There we go. And the missile down, up, and the drone down, and falling somewhere into the capital of Kyiv. Now, this is then geolocated. So here, this is Maidan Square, and this is this same statue with the drone, and this building at the back here where we see these pillars is this building here. You can see this circle here as well. So dead center of Ukraine. Now, this was for sure a Bayraktar drone, Turkish built. We can see the photo above of the one, and this is a Bayraktar here. So they are definitely the same drone as well. We see from our Atlas News the missile coming to hit from Getty Images too. Now, many are saying that this was misidentified and was shot down accidentally in a friendly fire incident, while the official Ukrainian Air Force narrative has been this, and this is from the official Ukrainian Air Force Facebook page. On May 4th, about 20 hours into the Kyiv region, during a planned flight, lost control of Bayraktar TB2. Since the uncontrolled stay of the BPLA in the skies of the capital could lead to unwanted consequences, the decision was made to apply mobile fire group calculations. Target is destroyed. It's a pity, but it's a technique, and such cases happen. Probably a technical malfunction. The causes are being established. As a result of the combat and the fall of debris over the BPLA, there are no casualties or injured. And this is definitely two very separating sides of this. The only thing I would like to comment on this is if this was flying somewhat stably, you'd think you would then shoot it down further away from a large populated area. We've also seen videos of people like this shooting at it with their rifles out of their windows. And this is a Western-built M4 style weapon here with the sight up as well to give more magnification and shooting at this drone. Then from here you can see the missile going up and then striking the drone. But, people just taking pot shots at this. And there are a lot of cowboys operating in that theatre as well. Now, also I've seen Russian soft units, Special Operations Forces, have been deployed from a transport plane in Sudan amidst the unrest happening there currently. Interestingly, these vehicles have the infamous Z on the side of them that was seen in Ukraine. So here we have the transporter and these vehicles off to the side here. Now, from what I see, that these two here are Toyota Hilux or Land Cruiser vehicles, which, had won for Toyotas of War. If you're not familiar, Toyotas of War was the greatest page ever. It just had Toyotas from all areas of war, from organizations using Toyotas through to Western forces using Toyotas, and just how they can just bolt on weapons onto them, and Toyotas are a great vehicle. And here we see this vehicle in Sudan with the Russian flag on the back and the infamous Z on the side, which was initially for marking for the invasion of Ukraine. And these troops were apparently deployed independently of Wagner forces, who have also been operating in that region and operating in that region for a number of years. Now, one thing we have got as well from the Kyiv Independent is that the SBU, who's the Intelligence Service of Ukraine, has detained a deputy mayor over embezzlement charges. That the SBU has detained Deputy Mayor for uncovering an embezzlement scheme in Mykolaiv on May 4th, so yesterday. Approximately 1 million hryvnias, which is $27,000 of budget funds allocated for defence procurement in Mykolaiv Oblast. During the search, SBU found over 1 million hryvnias and evidence of an illegal activity on May 4th as well. Another local official, Odessa Mayor, was also detained over embezzlement charges. He faces accusations of embezzling 92 million hryvnias, $2.5 million, so a lot more money, of budget funds while purchasing Odessa's crane factory building. Now, this does have as well that Ukraine is definitely trying to clear up the corruption in the country, and US anti-corruption elements being deployed into Ukraine to try and clear up that further corruption as the West sends billions of dollars. But legends, that's everything from me today. If you'd like to support me further, links are down below, but never ever feel obliged. I'll see you guys soon. Have a great weekend. So thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.